everybody to our April 22nd Rotary Club, our midday meeting of the Rotary Club of Rochester. I'm Chris Colby, 2021 president of your club. The four-way test, for those of you who didn't hear, we're going to practice it once because we're having a little trouble getting it working properly. First of all, I guess you can unmute yourself so we can say this. And John, you want to run a practice where John will basically say the first line and finish, and then we will all say it again. So go ahead, John.
Four-way test of the things we think, say, or do. First, is it the truth?
First,
is it the truth?
there we go.
We're trainable.
Yep.
You want me to start it over now?
No, well, we've
Continue on. Okay. Two, is it fair to all concerned?
Two, is it fair to all concerned?
Three, will it build goodwill and better friendships?
Three,
Build goodwill and better
friendships.
Four, will it be beneficial to all concerned?
Four,
Will
it
build
be beneficial to all
concerned.
Five, can you make a buck?
No, it should turn a profit. They got that one knocked out though.
No.
Entrepreneur in the club right there.
Yeah.
Thank you, John, for doing that. Julie, our ongoing reflectionist, is going to do an inspirational talk, and she says it's metaphorical. So I guess we can interpret the message in whatever ways we feel personally comfortable. So go ahead, Julie.
Well, sure. And again, you don't always have to hear me. All you got to do is sign up. I'm going to put the link in the chat again, and the link is always in the moccasin flower that goes out on Tuesdays. Yeah. And we have nobody signed up for the second and fourth meetings from now until December. So help a sister out, please. Please go sign up. My God. Okay. There's been so much happening. And I think there was a lot of hope for 2021 that everything was slowed down. I think it sped up. And there was there's big work that's happening in our society right now. When we think about the Chauvin case, and when we think about the vaccines being rolled out, and when we start thinking about how we want to continue to be as a society going forward. And I think this reading from Nikki Banas asks us to remember for ourselves what it is that we are going to bring forward. And for Rotary, what are we as an organization, as a club, going to bring forward and contribute to this societal conversation happening right now around race, around equity, and around inclusion? How do we create a sense of belonging for our neighbors? So Nikki Banas says, pause. Slow it all down. Pause from your full calendar and long task list. Take a moment or 10 to simply be. To remind yourself that this is life right here, right now. Pause to reacquaint yourself with your pulsing heart and your incredible body that allows you to do all that you do. To remember that life is precious and fragile and should be lived in love. To remind yourself that whatever is happening or wherever you find yourself in your journey, it is all as it is supposed to be. Reflected. Thanks.
Very good. Thank you, Julie.
That was. Could you have that posted? That was terrific. Just terrific.
You bet, LJ.
Yeah, thank you. So, do we have any, before we get into anything else, do we have any guests that are visiting us today? I don't see any offhand, but I wanted to ask that question. So it looks like everybody's a member here. So welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us today. A reminder that this month has 5 Thursdays. Next Thursday is the 5th, And we're planning what we call an exploration day, which is kind of a visioning session. And instead of the rotation day that we had originally on our calendar, we just can't do rotation days for the short term right now. So next Thursday you'll be getting a Zoom link that will be sent out as a reminder. And this is an opportunity for all club members to provide some input into the future of our club and give some thought to how we slowly emerge from this pandemic and plan for the upcoming Rotary year, which begins on July 1st. Kind of fits into what Julie was just talking about, is stepping back and thinking a little bit about who it is and what we want to be before we launch into just another year, because the world is different now than it was a year ago, and I think we want to try to respond to that in some fashion. And now is a good chance, and this Rotary Club is a good opportunity to address that. So please do think about this opportunity, and there'll be additional information in next week's Moccasin Flower to give you some thoughts to think about here. As a reminder, the Rotary Zoom online meetings will continue for the foreseeable future, with the informal Rotary after hours on the first Thursdays, and continue our second and fourth Thursdays of the month for our regular midday meetings. I should mention that we have not been getting much attention or attendance on the Rotary after hours the first Thursday of the month. And so I've been giving a little thought to maybe changing the format or doing something different with that. And so stay tuned for some information about that. The opportunity for getting together, perhaps when the weather gets a little better, might allow us to be able to meet in person, because that was the original intent. But we'll see what the next few weeks bring as far as an opportunity to do something different there. Also a reminder, the third Thursday meetings continue, and make sure that you keep an eye on your notifications from your convener, and try to participate in that if you can. Those are becoming pretty important for us for a variety of reasons, and an opportunity to kind of connect with each other on a more personal basis. So if you could keep an eye on your emails from your convener, there'll be a Zoom link that will let you know when that will be. Incoming President Audrey Baessler has an update on filling our vacant admin position. Audrey?
Thank you, President Chris. So the position is currently posted. So there's a link to the job posting on our website, and there's also, if somebody goes to Indeed, they'll also find it there. So they need to send a cover letter and resume to the Rotary email. And so we really appreciate you spreading the word. If there's anybody you know who might be interested in a half-time position, we would welcome you sharing that information. The posting will be there until filled. The search committee is going to be meeting in early May to look through the incoming resumes. So if you have somebody you know, please let them know soon. The other thing I should note for next Thursday is we are, as you know through the Moccasin Flower and what we've said before, is that we're also going to be working on a visioning. And so the input for next week will help us in that visioning session as well. And so that's coming up next month already. So it's really important that we hear from everybody. And so if you can participate next week, we would love to have you there. So thank you.
Thank you, Audrey. Let's see, look at my script here. Jill Cordes, we talked about this a little bit for those of you who joined late. Maybe Jill, you could give us basically an update on the 3 Club Rotary community service opportunity that we have on tree planting coming up on May 1st.
Yeah, thanks, President Chris. We have our tree planting coming up on May 1st, and it kicks off over between on the bike trail by Hy-Vee at Crossroads and the Zumbro River over in that area. And so as of now, there's a couple ways as Rotarians you can get involved. Purchase some bundles of whips. They're 10 for $10. We have about 19 to 20 of them left. You can click on the link on the moccasin flower on the to get to that page, or you can email me. My information is listed as well. With those whips, they do want them planted. The Parks Department does want them planted as part of our 1,000 trees for a total of 2,021 trees for this event. The other way you can get involved is by a 21 salute tree. We have 21 larger trees. Those are the memorial trees where they can be dedicated in honor, or you can just purchase them for yourself. And those are $125. As a club, we were allotted 7, and we have we have 2 of them left. I know some other clubs still have some flexibility in their numbers. So if I do have a demand, I can reach out to the other 2 clubs and ask for sharing of that and get a few extra for that. But we have enough whips to go around. Everyone can purchase as they feel appropriate. Another way to get involved is be a greeter, be a photographer, be involved that day. We have 2 different ways you can volunteer. We have a designated sign up to volunteer here for the greeter, the photographer. There's different shifts available. I know I'm a greeter at 8:30 a.m. on Monday or on May 1st. Chris is also there. Bill's there. So I think we're the fun group, but there's a couple spots there if you want to be a part. Otherwise, there's some later in the day if that works better for your schedule. Bring your family, bring your friends, be a whip planner. I know each section is broken out and we have availability in each. The first section, 8:30 to 10:30, is pretty full. We have 30 of the 40, but then as we get down to the end of the day on May 1st, they're pretty open. So, you know, make it a fun family day, bring them all out, plant some whips. We hope to see you there. If you have any questions or want to purchase anything, reach out to me, or you can do it online as well. So let me know if you have any questions.
I do. If we volunteer to plant, do we need to bring our own tools?
They will have shovels and everything there. I would suggest bringing some gloves, but show up. Even though it is outside, we still have to wear masks. So bring a mask and gloves. Bring your own water, Audrey, because with COVID, we will not be supplying water bottles or anything. So if you get thirsty, bring in some water. It's going to be, 70 and sunny that day, I know. So you're going to want some sunscreen too.
Let's hope so.
I'm glad you're guaranteeing that.
Yeah.
Well, Jill already guaranteed that at our last committee meeting, so we're counting on that.
Yeah.
So just a little fill in another couple of pieces. The Park and Rec Department is really kind of the overview on this. They identified the location. They cleared the area that these trees would go in, of buckthorn and junk trees, and so these would be higher level quality trees, poplar and paper birch and those kind of things. I think some pine trees in there and so on.
Yeah.
And so they will have it staked out where we are to plant these whips, these trees, and so they're going to have a group of their own staff that have volunteered to be there as well. So it should be kind of a fun event if the weather behaves. We also assume that we believe that the mayor and perhaps a couple of representatives would be there, and I believe that Ed Merrick, our district governor, probably will come down for it as well. So there'll be a good opportunity to have a good Rotary service in the community event here. So if you could make an effort, if you haven't signed up, if you could come over for it, sign up as a volunteer. It shouldn't be too big of an effort, and it should be kind of fun. So thank you.
Thank you. And last thing, if there is a rain delay, we'll make that call sometime Friday and send out emails to everybody. But it has to be kind of catastrophic, lightning or flooding event. For little rain, we can go out in, so.
Right. So, and I should mention Bill Wichter has been very involved in this as well. He's helping putting together the memorial certificates and helping with that committee too. So let's have a good event there. Are there any other announcements that anyone would like to make on behalf of the club, or any other events that we should know about that I might not have mentioned? I did see, Ashok, you reminded me that today is Earth Day. And so I guess you could say the intent of trying to do something environmental, the germ of that idea actually kind of started with the idea that we try to do this tree planting on Earth Day, but it just became too difficult to get trees delivered and all that stuff by this timing. So May 1st seems to be good. And I believe Arbor Day is next Saturday? It's in this period anyway. So we're working in a couple week period here, which is in the spirit of Earth Day and Arbor Day. So
yeah, as opposed to germs, seeds might be a better term, and it takes a little time for seeds to germinate. So I think waiting a week from Earth Day is not a bad timing. And spring also is eternal. So
especially if it's going to be 70 and sunny.
yeah, I just wanted to have a shout out to Joseph Halakla, who helped with White Oak Park cleanup yesterday, and the tradition continues for now, but we'll see what the needs assessment and the member interests are in the future. We'll hold it every usually third Wednesday of the month, from 6 to 7
At White Oaks Park.
at White Oak Park. Yep.
So
Thanks, Joseph.
Lori, perhaps you could make sure that gets in the moccasin flower so people have a reminder about that. Okay, she's writing it down. Thank you.
Yep.
So if there aren't any other announcements, I'll introduce our program for today. Our program presentation is by fellow Rotarian Paul Baessler. Paul is President-elect nominee of the Rochester Risers Rotary Club. And in addition, he was the 2015-2016 president of the Rotary Club of Austin. Paul was raised on a beef cattle farm near Sedalia, Missouri. He received his BS in agricultural education from Northwest Missouri State University. He was previously the community market president for U.S. Bank in Austin before being named area manager for ag resource management in September of 2016. Paul has worked in the financial service industry, focusing on agricultural finance for over 35 years, and previously taught high school vocational agriculture. He has lived in Rochester since 2004, has been married to his wife Dawn for 41 years. Congratulations. They have two sons, Reed, who is an attorney in Seattle, Washington, and Cole, who is an architectural designer and lives in Minneapolis. I should mention Cole worked with me at CRW for many years. He's a very talented designer and an architect. So good guy. So it's my pleasure to introduce Paul Baessler. Paul, I guess you've got your screen shared and you're up and operating, so have at it.
Good.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you, Chris. It's always a pleasure to be part of another club's meeting. I always enjoy visiting when I do travel, and I appreciate being able to present today to your club some information about the importance of agriculture to our state, our local and national economy. For over 40 years, I've made my living serving this industry, and really am only one generation removed from actual production agriculture as an adult, after growing up, as Chris said, on producing beef on a small farm in West Central Missouri. I suspect many of you too are actually only one generation removed. However, production agriculture is in many ways much different than what you experienced. Today, agriculture is generally a technologically advanced, system-based industry. I've presented this information to a number of groups, including my own Rotary Club, as well as the Greater Rochester Leadership Program. It really all started a number of years ago when I was involved in another leadership group that I was one of the first cohorts in, and then it continued when I served the community over in Austin during their Leadership Austin, and actually served as the day leader for Agriculture Day, which was always in April. So it's appropriate that I'm doing this now. I do have a couple of goals today. Hopefully, first, that you're going to come away with a better understanding of the overall economic ecosystem that we're a part of, not only here in Olmsted County, but in Greater Rochester, but also in the state of Minnesota. Secondly, I hope you'll understand that my passion as an agricultural advocate is grounded by my desire to provide you with factual information to help you understand its importance to our economy. I regularly tell audiences that my goal is to help you understand that milk really doesn't come from a carton or a gallon container, and meat doesn't come from a black styrofoam tray. Today, we'll discuss the food and agriculture industry and how it pertains to the local and state economy. We will focus on the three phases of this industry: production, otherwise the farmers, processing, and the distribution of both finished goods and raw commodities. We'll look at some information I've prepared for about 25 minutes, and I'll leave time for questions and discussion. I'm going to start with, in September of 2018, the documentary Faith, Hope, and Science about the Mayo Clinic's 150-year anniversary related how the medical community here in Rochester amazed those around the world with the success of the clinic, and they dubbed it, hopefully you remember this, the miracle in the cornfield. Today, now over 150 years later, the clinic is still the miracle in the cornfield, albeit the fields are just a bit farther from the clinic. As I explain to people who come to Rochester, family, friends, they all know about the clinic, but you recognize that we're surrounded by production agriculture. And more importantly, as you move throughout the community, you also recognize that we have a tremendous amount of further processing of agricultural goods, primarily milk. I do have a question for most of you, and that is, how many of you are currently involved in any of these three areas, either production, processing, or distribution? From a show of hands, not very many. And that's not unusual. When I ask the next question, do you have a family member who is involved in any of those three areas of the food and agriculture business? Usually a few more hands come up. And of course, when I did this presentation many times in Austin, of course, my room was typically filled with a lot of hands in the air. It's not unusual in Rochester. Although when I was talking to Melanie yesterday, she related her own raising on a farm over in the Lewiston area, and the fact that her brother and sister-in-law continue to operate that farm. And I understand that her brother made a presentation to the club. And of course, that's just one phase of agriculture that we know. So the first slide here shows some current information. This is the most current information from 2020 year that shows that amongst all the U.S. states, we're number 5 in total ag production. We'll look at some of the other states here in a bit. Obviously, we rank very high in several commodities. Sugar beets, canning peas, green peas for processing there. Obviously, we have a nearby plant there at Lakeside Foods up in Plainview. Number 2 in dry bean production, and most people really don't know about that, but in the western part of the state, and especially the northwestern part of the state, a lot of kidney beans, navy beans, and pinto beans are grown there. Sweet corn for processing, you see a lot of that here in Olmsted County, again, going to a processing facility around the state. And of course, we lost our processing plant here. Now it's a vacant lot, so probably soon not to be vacant. In the US, obviously soybeans, spring wheat, sunflowers and oats are very high. We don't lead in corn and canola production, but that is more and more important. And as you can see, other things. The number 10 in alfalfa, I think that's interesting, and it really speaks to the area here and our dependence on livestock production, especially dairy, which we'll talk about, as we move on. Livestock production is also very important. Most people do not know that we lead the nation in turkey production. And we're number 2 in hogs. And that continues to be a very, very strong portion of our livestock economy. When you look at the overall monies that are generated from those, you can see that corn does lead cash receipts there by the chart. Move on to the next slide here. There we go. Yeah. So as we look at again, we rank number 5. So what are some of the other states? And obviously, California leads the nation in ag production. Those of you that have ever traveled to California, the Central Valley of California, because of their ability to grow crops in multiple, basically, seasons as we would know it, by far, they lead the nation in not only the production of ag commodities, but in the dollar generation from them. And it mainly comes down to they raise a lot of high value crops, vegetables, nuts, almonds are very important to that economy. Then you move into what we would call the farm states as we know it: Iowa, Nebraska, Texas, and then get to Minnesota. So the I states, as they're known, Indiana, Illinois, Iowa, all top 10, primarily corn and soybean production in those states. You move to Nebraska, that's a combination of cattle and corn production. And because of their irrigation, that's why they're number 3. Texas is pretty much driven primarily around the beef cattle industry. However, dairy in the northwest portion of the state is very, very important. Probably one of the world's largest yogurt plants happens to be in Delhart, Texas. Then we fall in there. We're, as you can see, we're pretty diversified, both in crops and livestock. Illinois, again, very similar to Minnesota, corn, soybeans, and swine production, hogs. Kansas comes down to wheat and cattle again. Wisconsin, it's all about dairy. I know several years ago I went to a meeting over there, and it didn't start till 8 o'clock at night. And I thought, well, this is a strange time to start a meeting. And the reason they had to wait for everyone to get their chores done and get the cows milked. In the North Carolina, that's a swine producing state, but also very high production of vegetable crops. And then Indiana, again, corn, soybeans, and swine. Look at crops, again, very, very similar. Again, where we fall when it comes to livestock, we move down the way just a little ways, but stay in the top 10. So Minnesota agriculture, by far, as you're going to see, is a very important part of our economy. As you look at the state, you know, the state ag economist who does a real fine job for the state, putting these facts together for us to use, you can kind of see basically, you know, where are these things done, you know, and you know, we have a very large part of the state that is non-productive when it comes to agriculture. But the area that I primarily operate in, this area here in southeast and south central Minnesota, and the customers that I work with, again, it's primarily that crops, dairy, and hogs. The population in the state continues to move up. You know, we're basically about middle of the pack as far as overall population. The population increased year over year, so these are actual 20 numbers. The rural urban split remains about the same. And actually in Olmsted County, that rural urban split is about the same as the state. So we're not, you know, an outlier by any means. When it comes to the acres of farmland, as you can see, you know, just about 50% of the state is productive farmland. Average farm size sometimes surprises people that they are that small. You know, I grew up on a farm even smaller than that, but we had off-farm income. Both of my parents worked off the farm. When you look at that average farm size, it is a bit of a misnomer, because you have those who farm part-time, and then you have those that are truly full-time commercial size farms. The average customer I work with, they're typically 3 to as much as 5 times the size of the average there. And when I look at the loans, you know, I loan money for them to plant their crops, my average loan size is just short of $1 million. So it's a large business. The amount of dollars produced in the most recent information is finalized was 2019. You can see a pretty even split between crops and livestock. Nationally, we export a lot of our products. And interestingly, what's not on here is we also are a large importer of one commodity, and that's oats. And most people say, oats. Why would we import oats? Well, there's a Fortune 500 company up in Minneapolis known as General Mills. Don't know how many of you eat Cheerios, but most of that is Canadian oats that comes to Minnesota to be processed. So about 1/3 of what we generate as far as exports within the state comes from agriculture. Okay. I really like this slide. And you know, obviously I have a bias. I like the fact that the largest portion of this, as far as the industries, is agriculture and in the food industry. When you look at the other industries in the state, you can quickly understand where some of these fit in. You know, and when it comes to ag machinery is manufactured in Jackson by AGCO. You go by on the interstate, you can see some of the equipment that they manufacture there. But you look at vehicles, the importance of McNeilus in our local economy, you can see the importance of that as far as the exports. But you know, Cirrus up in the Duluth area, you know, in aircraft, you might think, well, gee, that's kind of an unusual thing. Well, it is, but all of these industries add to our economy here in the state. About a fourth, in the way I would put it, as you go by a soybean field, 1 row out of every 4 are exported, primarily, as you can see in the bottom pie chart there, to the Pacific Rim countries. But the Pacific Rim is also important to us when it comes to some of our processed livestock, especially pork, which would be really the number 2 commodity that's exported. Corn is primarily exported to Mexico. We have a tremendous amount of our products that go to Mexico for further processing. Soybean meal, processed soybeans, that also is going to primarily to the Pacific Rim countries. And you can see the importance of those countries. You know, when you start to add those up, you know, it's like, okay, you know, you go all the way from Indonesia there back to China. That's a substantial amount of the exports worldwide that we are doing. When we move to the next slide here, we move into some more localized, and right now they're finishing up the most recent census of agriculture. So unfortunately, this is the most recent information that we have. I can tell you that the number of farms hasn't changed a whole lot based on some of the preliminary information that I've seen. Obviously, our average farm size is a bit smaller than the statewide average. And again, fair number of part-time farmers, some of which farm as many as 500 and 600 acres, who work full-time off farm. We have a substantial amount of the economy here and generate, you know, about $50 million of net cash income. And so you can think about that in the overall county economy. Right now, economically, we've moved into a little higher plane of profitability in ag. 2020 is one of the best years in the last 10. And it looks like 2021 is kind of stacking up to do that. But when you move to the bottom of that slide, you can see that from a net cash income standpoint, they are fairly small. Again, it brings in that small scale agriculture, which is not unusual in a high population area like Rochester in Olmsted County. You know, you do have large farms. We have really the largest farm in the county is just southeast of town, and they're primarily a livestock production operation, both cattle and hogs. And you look at that, and you know they employ 30 people full time. You know, are generating somewhere between 12 and $18 million gross annually. Substantial part of the local economy. And a lot of people don't even know about drive by them on County 1 and you don't even think about it unless maybe there's manure that day. Then you know there's a farm nearby. When you look at the producers in the county, you know, this slide usually surprises people, the amount of females involved in agriculture. Worldwide, females far outweigh males involved in ag. In the US, that's not necessarily true, but when you look at our county, the male-female split is far greater than it is nationwide. What I would tell you, customers that I deal with, fully 50% of the operations that I deal with, in a lot of ways, the female member of that household is the primary financial manager, and is the person that we deal with on a regular basis. The one thing I don't like about this data, I wish they would break that 35 to 64-year-old a little differently than they do. I would tell you that I'm starting to see the average age move down in the customers that I deal with. Fewer and fewer of those are above 55, and a lot more are below 40 years of age, which is a good thing. It's something that we've kind of started to reverse the trend a little bit of the last 20 years. And here in Olmsted County, you know, we have a number of younger producers, and some of which that I get to work with. Little breakdown of the crops. Corn is still the primary crop, and the reason for that is, again, the number of livestock that we feed. Instead of being a typical crop rotation, which is 50% corn, 50% soybeans, in this case, we're raising more corn. Sweet corn and forage for livestock continues to be a large part of what we do here in the county. Again, a little breakout of sales, so you can see that those, as far as the USDA is concerned, they classify a commercial size farm as $100,000 or more of sales annually. Right now, about a third, a little less than a third of the farms would be classified a commercial size farm. The rest would be part-time, which again, they're very important to our economy. And you can kind of see the number of farms that are on the larger scale and above the average. So about 350, 360 farms would be above that average size farm within the state of Minnesota. So,
Well, we're starting to bump up against time, so I want to leave some room for some questions for you.
Yep, I'm down to actually the last two slides. So this one here is current information based on most recent census. Obviously, you can see what the largest employers are there to the left of the slide. Agriculture is way, way down in this, under 1,000 people approximately. Now this is the one that I want you to kind of wrap your head around. Okay, so these are all companies that are involved in either within the city limits of Rochester or within the county of Olmsted. Okay, so you've got an ethanol plant there at the top, Alcorn Clean Fuels over at Claremont. They are drawing about a third of the corn produced here in Olmsted County to their plant. If it doesn't go to that plant, it goes to a plant typically at Lisle, Minnesota. Actually, it's in Iowa, but it has a Lisle address. otherwise known as Absolute Energy, for ethanol production. CHS, we have a large CHS farmer here in Rochester. They purchased Greenway several years ago. CHS provides seed, feed, fertilizer, and crop chemicals to production agriculture. Most people don't necessarily hook Hormel and Genio together. Okay, Genio is a division of Hormel. Of course, Genio was a Minnesota founded and based company purchased by Hormel a number of years ago. Obviously, Hormel was founded in Austin and remains there today. They are the only Fortune 500 company in Minnesota outside of the metro. Okay, I believe I've got the current number there. Hormel number 37 with about $10 billion of revenue in the most recent year. Kemp's, of course, most people know we've got an ice cream plant and a fluid milk plant on North Broadway. The fluid milk was also produced in the plant API, okay, and no longer when that plant closed. The portion of that plant that produced fluid milk under the Kemp's brand went away. Cary, that would be out over by Rochester Meats, across the street and a little farther west on 7th. They're a food ingredients company. Actually, Cary takes fluid milk, produces some enzymes used by Rochester Meat Company. That's one of the reasons why they're nearby, but also in the cheese industry. They're actually an Irish company. And that plant, about every year that I've been here in town, I moved here in 2004, they've made an addition to. So it continues to be a very important part of our business. Most people don't know that Kroger is here in the community because of Pace Dairy. Pace Dairy is a division of Kroger. They manufacture processed cheese there. If you've ever been to country breakfast on the farm, any of that sliced cheese that they give away at the breakfast all comes from Pace. Again, fluid milk here in this part of the state is very important because of our dairy industry. Land O'Lakes is again supplying farmers with products, but they're also buying milk here in the county for further processing. Most people don't know about the next one, Ornu. Again, another Irish company. It's part of the Irish Dairy Board. Any of you eat Kerrygold butter? Well, that's the Irish Dairy Board. And Ornu, this is a dry ingredients company for them. They're located just to the west of Byron, out there on the north side of Highway 14. Again, continuing to grow. Some people say, well, why are the Irish in the US? Well, just think about their population versus ours. And so their farmer owners of those companies came here to the US to expand their economic influence in the world. Reichel, they have a plant here on the south side of town. They're involved in basically the food service industry, and they also have the former McNeilis building over at Dexter. They bought that actually from the Austin Development Corporation, who built that building originally, and they're processing over there. And then lastly, they're Rochester Meat Company. If you buy a prepared burger in the grocery store, there's a pretty good chance that it was made right here in Rochester at that location. So with that, I'm going to leave some questions, and hopefully I can answer them for you.
So Paul, I have a quick question while others are perhaps adding it into the chat room, if you want to add it there, or we can open it up after we get this question. How has the climate change affected production in our ag business? Have you had a chance, had any thoughts about how that has changed in terms of the products or the production or the whole scenario?
So it has in a couple of ways, Chris. Number one, especially in southern Minnesota, our weather patterns are very similar to what central Iowa was about 20 years ago. Okay, central Iowa is a very productive area of the nation, and so what we're seeing here, and some of it's seed technology and just the overall improvement in the ag industry over time. But we're seeing similar yields. In fact, in a lot of cases, and I have friends that farm in that area of central Iowa, that we can outproduce them here. Okay, our rainfall, it tends to be just a smidge more than it was 20 years ago. Where I do see it more so, and especially over the last 20 years, is in northwest Minnesota. See a lot more corn and soybean production up there, and fewer acres of small grains and dry beans, things that you dealt with shorter growing seasons, as well as less rainfall. So,
other questions? You want to unmute yourself and ask the question? Had one other thing I wrote down. What sort of disruption has there been in the supply chain because of COVID related activities and the past couple of years?
The supply chain for livestock was the one most severely affected because of the number of people it takes to harvest livestock into the food chain. It also affected the ability to move that product once we had it into the marketplace. I know one company in particular, Golden Plum, and one of their plants primarily served the food service industry. And they had a tremendous amount of product in cold storage when COVID hit. Well, unfortunately, because food service reduced, and it went to individual people buying product, they actually had to reprocess some of that product so that they could sell it in the grocery store. So, that would be a major disruption. I know Hormel was able to keep their plants open. Smithfield and Worthington had challenges. Swift had challenges in Sioux Falls. Obviously, that was a national news with a number of workers who contracted COVID. So the grain industry, not so much, with the exception of soybeans. Again, because of what occurred in the Pacific Rim, we weren't shipping as much of that product that way because they had some disruption in their food chain also.
All right. Sarah, you had a question you wanted to ask?
No, not a question, just an off-topic comment to Paul. My best friend from college and my maid of honor in my wedding from Mankato, we're both from Rochester, married someone who moved her to Sedalia.
Oh,
and I visited her there twice. And I just wanted to tell you what an agricultural community.
Yeah.
I've been, and Sedalia is not that big. So how many people know where it is? I do.
Well, Paul comes by that naturally then from
Sure.
Probably, but yeah, it was an interesting visit, but she's now in Kansas City, but she lived there for a long time. And I just wanted to tell you.
What did she do in the community?
She was a social worker.
Okay.
So Steve Sperling had a question, with the increase nationally of CAFO, and I'm not sure what that is.
Yeah.
Facilities, do you see that influencing ag policy nationally and locally?
Okay, so CAFO is a concentrated ag finishing operation. It's basically what it is densely populated livestock facilities. So the easiest one that you can see here, you just drive by on the interstate, would be right out here by Iota. Got a 3,000 cow dairy. They're in 3 barns. So that's it's an animal feeding operation there, obviously producing milk. So what are some of the challenges? Well, obviously animal welfare is a huge challenge. Now there's kind of a push-pull within production agriculture. You know, when people raised hogs 50 years ago, you know, when I was a young man, they did it in outside lots, farrowed their pigs in huts, individual huts out in the pasture. Today, we have a controlled environment for them. Some people would say, well, it was more humane to do it that way 50 years ago than it is today. Well, in a lot of ways, that's not true because, again, parasites, the comfort of the animals all enter in. Now, they're always bad actors, no doubt about that. And I actually have an employee here whose family is heavily involved in the swine industry. And their operation was infiltrated by PETA. They had some employees in that facility. It doesn't matter if you're a parent. It doesn't matter if you're an employer. It doesn't matter if you're involved in production agriculture. You have good days and bad days. And unfortunately, they had a few bad days in that facility. It was bad. What I would say is that we're going to see probably more concentration in less densely populated areas of the country. So if you look at what South Dakota has done, they've really tried to attract livestock agriculture, especially dairies. Again, they don't have a lot of other opportunities over there, and they have land base that they can spread the manure. You know that some people call it waste. It's not waste. It's definitely a nutrient that's used heavily in crop production. You can use it well. Now, greenhouse gases are another, you know, a whole nother issue. And I think on these CAFOs, they're going to have to determine when you see a large concentrated manure holding facility, how are they going to capture the methane off of that? And you know, there's a lot of good technology that has been developed, and they're trying to implement in these large scale livestock operations. And you're going to see more and more of that. And I think, you know, definitely the present administration in Washington is definitely put a huge focus on how can we still have to eat. We probably can't do 375 acre farms, and we're going to have to utilize you know, large scale agriculture. Got to do it humanely. You have to do it you know, with the best technology available. But we also have to consider, you know, everything. And again, I think cover crops, carbon sequestration, methane generation for energy, all of these things are going to be a part of ag. And you know, we're seeing more and more emphasis put on how do we control, you know, the bad things that come from it's a manufacturing environment. You have to think about that. A little different than most people think about manufacturing.
Well, it sounds like technology really can enter into helping manage it all too. So, Doug, you had a question?
Well, I do have a question, and I don't think we have very much time left. But I think you mentioned 30% of corn went to ethanol. I had heard that 40% may be dead. What's the future of that look like going forward here? As far as going to electric vehicles and so on.
Yeah, so the 30% number that I used, Doug, was based on the production within this county. Yes, nationwide, we have a higher percentage used in ethanol production. There's opportunities still with, obviously we're going to move to EVs. There's a lot of emphasis on those. If you look at Brazil primarily powers all of their gasoline powered vehicles with ethanol. They've been a worldwide producer of ethanol for many, many years. It's probably still a very much needed. It may not be needed as much here in the US. We may export a lot of our ethanol production because we can produce corn as efficiently as anyone in the world. We may move, again, those Pacific Rim countries that are utilizing coal and oil. Yes, China is moving to EVs just like we are, but there's still going to be a need. So there might be an opportunity still. The nice thing about ethanol is we do have a co-product. We have animal feed that is a co-product of that. We have CO2 that's used in a lot of ways, corn oil. So plants that are efficient, that are looking at all of the various avenues to market that crop, further, I think will be good. I think here in our area, Alcorn, the plant at Janesville, the plant at Lyle, they'll all stay very viable. They're well run, and they're in the middle of a cornfield, so they'll continue to be important too. But where the products end up may not be in our gas tank, maybe in someone else's.
It's a changing world, and of course, changing world economy with this stuff. So it's pretty clear,
Right?
What we gain in one area maybe moves to a different area or whatever.
Correct.
Mark Drips, you had a question that you wanted to ask.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Paul, thank you for your presentation. A few years ago, I was at a friend's wedding up in Red Wing, and I was talking to one of her guests who was a farmer, had some property, some land in Goodhue. And he pulled up an app on his phone, and as he was sitting there, a combine was running through the fields, and he was telling me he had red, green, and yellow on his app, and it was showing the different yields of what he's getting through his land there. And I was just amazed at what the technology does in the farming agriculture area now. What is the biggest change that you've seen in your 40-year career that has just kind of shocked you in what's happening with farming?
Oh my, it'd be a number of things. I always tell people this. I have a picture when I was christened of riding in my grandfather's horse-drawn surrey to the church. No, I'm 63 in March. You think about that, and my grandfather picked corn by hand. He never had a combine. I would say the ability to farm as many acres with as few people as we can do it. I know myself, I'm involved with a friend of mine in Northwest Iowa, and we harvest 80 acres in a day, 3 of us, and we'd hardly break a sweat. I mean, it's pretty easy. The technology, between GPS, which is, he was utilizing a GPS app with some sensors within that combine that would tell him, how much production is going on in a given part of the field, hence the red, green, and yellow in his app. I look at this thing that I have, this cell phone here, and, the power I have. When I started in the financial services industry, I started with a pencil and a yellow pad. Okay. We did not have a computer on our desk. Chris, you're smiling, but I think, in 1983, when I started loaning money to farmers, which honestly was not all that long ago. You know, we had 4 and 6 row planters. Today we have 24 and 48 row planters. You know, this planter that's in my view, you know, that's a 16 row. That's not all that big. You know, I've got customers who are farming 4,000 and 5,000 acres with 4 people. And, you know, again, they hardly break a sweat. The one technology I think is the greatest, and, you know, I go back to the first time I ever planted corn when I was probably 11 years old. And, you know, 4 row, 38 inches wide between the rows, and, you know, going along at about 1.5 miles an hour. Today, most people have what's known as auto steer, again, uses GPS technology. They do not, that's why on this planter behind me, those things that are folded up on the edge there, that I'm kind of where my finger is, those are markers. Those markers are folded up. The reason being is they've got auto steer on, and that machine is going through the field, following a GPS line, we call it an AB line, and you're doing it hands-free. In fact, my friend down there in Northwest Iowa, I always can tell when he's planting corn because he's calling me on the phone and talking to me while he's planting. I hear the sensors beep, and I know he's coming to the end rows. He's got to turn the machine. He turns it. He gets back on the phone with me. Technology in agriculture is fantastic. I have one quick story about a customer I have, and he's turned into a friend of mine up in North Dakota. In fact, I talked to him yesterday. Farms about 4,500 acres, mostly small grains. He's west of Grand Forks. 2 years ago, he had a very compact planting season. He was working about 15, 16 hours a day. And he said, you know, Paul, I knew that I had really burned my candle both ends that week. But he says, you know, I left the yard to head to church, and I put the cruise control on, and I let go of the wheel. And my wife looked at me and said, what are you doing? Well, he was used to being in the tractor all week. You know, he just set it on, and down the road you go, you know, down the field you go. But, you know, and she was like, you know, Greg, get your hands back on the wheel, man. We're going to the ditch. But, so, yeah, the technology in ag is actually, every time I'm in the combine in the fall, I always think of my grandfather. And I was very close to my granddad. You know, he farmed on a small scale, but if I could get him up in the combine with me and see what we do with the machines of today, he would just be literally amazed. And I am. I'm still in awe of the technology that is long.
No doubt. Well, Paul, I think it's time to wrap up, but I want to thank you a lot for giving us some perspective on something that we all kind of take for granted, obviously, in our area, and even though it's a huge part of our economy here, you could see that very few of us actually in this club at least are involved in the ag business, but we're all impacted by it for sure. So I want to thank you for that. And as we close out today, I want to give thanks to those who joined us today. Obviously, the 4-way test, John Woodruff volunteered to do that. Thank you, John. Julie Brock did her usual words of wisdom and inspiration. And if you want to sign up for doing some of that, please do, because Julie's kind of scrambling, trying to find people to do some of these activities. And certainly Paul Baessler for joining us today and giving us a very informative program. So as we adjourn, go and serve, and remember, Rotary opens opportunities in our community and in the world. So thank you for joining us, and we are adjourned.